All right, welcome. My name is Evan Clark. I'm the president of the Secular Student Alliance here at California Lutheran University. This weekend we've been hosting a conference, the SSA SoCal Leadership Conference, and tonight our keynote presentation, which is open to the public, is for Michael Shermer. Michael Shermer is the founding publisher of Skeptic magazine, the executive director of the Skeptic Society, and a monthly columnist for Scientific America. So please help me in welcoming Michael Shermer.
Yep. Thank you so much. We got to get hooked up here. We have the PA system and the camera. I'll just stuff that in my pocket. And then this. All right, hang on. Thank you for your patience of Job, which is appropriate, considering where we are. All right. So, if you will turn to your hymnals, I would like to read randomly from Psalms 132. Ooh, no. No, never mind. Let's see what else we got here. Whoa, okay. This one has a plus sign on it, so that's positive. It's for the heart of reading, big print. And let's see what else we have here. Oh, it's a laptop. Okay. I feel a little nervous about speaking in a church. You know, just in case I'm wrong. It's entirely possible. But, you know, God gave us a brain that works, and He has only Himself to blame if we used it, right? So I am the publisher of this magazine, Skeptic magazine. I brought a couple of cases, so everybody should be able to get one. There should be enough for everybody of our last issue, volume 16, number 1, on happiness is our cover story, so there's plenty to be skeptical about there. Not that you shouldn't be happy that the so-called science of it gets misused. Anyway, so every issue of Skeptic has a particular theme to it. It's a quarterly publication of the 501c3 nonprofit science education organization called the Skeptic Society. You can join the Skeptic Society and get a subscription to memberships at skeptic.com, or you can walk into any Barnes & Noble, Borders bookstore. Well, not Borders anymore, I guess. And pick one up there, or you can, as I said, just go online. Everyone has a theme, like we did one on artificial intelligence. When will computers achieve human-level intelligence? Well, my standard line was that we are 5 years away and always will be. But as of Wednesday night, after Watson beat Ken, Jen, and Rutan, then it's looking like it's much closer than I thought it might be. So, wow, cool. We did one on 9/11 conspiracy theories. Was 9/11 a conspiracy? Well, yes, actually it was. By definition, 19 members of Al-Qaeda plotting to fly planes into buildings without telling us ahead of time constitutes a conspiracy. But that, of course, is not what the 9/11 truthers think. They think it was an inside job by the federal government. Specifically, the Bush administration orchestrated the whole thing. This, the most incompetent administration in the history of the United States, somehow managed to pull off the most sophisticated conspiracy in history. And that's how we know it can't have been an inside job, right? Because it worked, right? We did one on the eponymous Ponzi. That's Charles Ponzi. Actually, of course, this was triggered by the Bernie Madoff scam, in which my cover story author there, Stephen Greenspan, no relation to the maestro, is an expert on financial scams. Himself lost half of his life savings to a Bernie Madoff feeder fund, showing how easy it is to fall into these kinds of scams, right? So how does that work? What's the psychology of that? We do a lot on global warming, global climate change, because there are skeptics amongst the skeptics. And that leads us to an interesting question. What does it mean to be a skeptic? You could be skeptical of global warming, or perhaps you're skeptical of the global warming skeptics, which makes you, what, a believer? And what does that actually mean, right? I mean, these are fuzzy words that get tossed about in social commentary and politics, but we try to define these a little more carefully. These, by the way, are illustrations, not photographs. And it turns out it doesn't really matter because the world's going to end in 2012. Massive collision. Actually, I just found out this week that the world, a judgment day is coming May 21st this year. So this is very exciting. I have issued a challenge to any of the believers in the May 21st judgment day, if I can have their cars or their house, because you can't take it with you. So they say. Anyway, so I did bring some of my books with me that we'll do a signing afterwards, and I will introduce you someday to the Skeptical Dog. I don't know, somebody just sent this to me. So this is my favorite example of the need for science education. This is a conversation overheard on Rodeo Drive. Let's see how the volume's working here. Yep, it's working. Oops. All right. Yeah, those tusks are very dangerous. So tonight I'm going to talk about the, actually my next book comes out May 21st. Can you believe it? It does. It's called The Believing Brain. So I'm going to talk about beliefs, not just why people believe weird things as advertised, but why people believe anything, things at all. And it all comes down to the brain. I want to believe, you want to believe, we all form all sorts of beliefs. In fact, we have what I call a belief engine. That is, we are pattern-seeking primates. We connect the dots. A appears connected to B. And this is what's called association learning. There's two kinds. Of course, the classical conditioning, as with Pavlov and his dog. You ring the bell, you give him some food, and he salivates. You ring the bell, you give him some food, and he salivates. You ring the bell, he salivates. So you've associated A with B. The ringing of the bell, the noise, is associated with the food, so he salivates automatically. It's a conditioned response. It's association learning. Or if it's the rat pressing levers for food, that's exactly what they do. You starve your rats. Well, you don't completely starve them. You just make them hungry. So that when you come into the lab in the morning, they're very excited to see you because they get to eat. But they have to work for it. They have to press this bar, but you have to shape them to get over there. They get closer to the bar, you give them a reinforcer. They get a little bit closer, you give them another reinforcer. They actually touch the bar, it closes an electrical circuit. The little hopper comes up, gives them a pellet. And so he's associated A with B. This is operant conditioning. So both forms of classical and operant conditioning are basic association learning. That's how the process works. All animals do it, from C. elegans to H. sapiens. That's what animals do. We learn stuff. We're pattern-seeking primates. This is what this kind of science looked like. A few decades ago, in the 1970s, this was your speaker at Cal State Fullerton. That was a cutting-edge computer at the time, which we programmed by cables plugging into the wires. These are programmable HP calculators. These are called pencils that we used to use back in the day, and those are graph paper, and that's how we kept track of our data. Here's one of my pigeons from 1977. Pecking one of two keys. He had to learn what the pattern was. Once he learned the pattern, then he got rewarded with a little grain hopper that came up and gave him some grain. And it turns out that if you randomly assign the reinforcers by time, random time, a variable interval schedule of reinforcement, but randomly, that whatever he happened to be doing just before he got rewarded, he just repeats it. And so if he happened to be, twirling around once to the left and touches the wall and he gets reinforced, whatever he happened to be doing, he repeats that behavior. So this was discovered by Skinner initially in the late 1950s. It's called superstition, or magical thinking. By definition, a reinforcement is anything that causes an organism to repeat what he just did. That's what we do. All animals do this. It's not just a bird brain problem. If you go to Las Vegas, you'll see people repeating these kinds of behaviors, right? So in other words, these are what I call patternicity, a process of patternicity, the tendency to find meaningful patterns in both meaningful and meaningless noise. Again, I'm not interested in just why people believe weird things, but why people believe anything at all. So when you think that you found a pattern, you can make one of two types of errors. A type 1 error, a false positive, is believing a pattern is real when it isn't. That is, you find a non-existing pattern. That's called a false positive or a type 1 error. A type 2 error is a false negative. That is, not believing a pattern is real when it is. You miss something important there, not recognizing a real pattern. Okay, so thought experiment. You are a hominid on the plains of Africa 3.5 million years ago. Your name is Lucy. You hear a rustle. Thank you for getting that. Not all audiences get that. Lucy? What? So I appreciate that. A learned audience. Usually I speak at colleges. It's not good. It's not looking good. They need critical thinking. Anyway, you hear a rustle in the grass. Is it a dangerous predator or is it just the wind? Well, if you think that, we'll go forward. Right, okay. There we go. Yay. I've been having computer problems the last week or so. Those of you who are Mac people, I've been getting the spinning beach ball of death. I got a new hard drive. I've reinstalled anyway, it's just, so bear with me if we have problems. So if you believe that the rustle in the grass is a dangerous predator, and it turns out it's just the wind, that's a low-cost error. That's a type 1 error. You've made an error in cognition. But that's low cost. So what? No big deal. You just become more cautious. You see animals on the fur, fin, and feather shows on the science and nature channels where they just become super vigilant and they move off and so forth. On the other hand, if you believe that the rustle in the grass is just the wind and it turns out it's a dangerous predator, you're lunch. Congratulations, you've just been given a Darwin Award for taking yourself out of the gene pool before reproducing. That's a high-cost error. So type 2 errors are more costly than type 1 errors, especially in circumstances like this. So the only formula for the evening is that patternicities occur whenever the cost of making a type 1 error is less than the cost of making a type 2 error. Okay, the problem is how do we calculate that? So I call this the pattern detection problem. That is, assessing the difference between a type 1 and type 2 error is highly problematic, especially in the split-second life and death situation. So the default position is just to assume that all patterns are real. Just assume that all rustles of the grass are dangerous predators and not just the wind, just in case. And therefore, I think we evolved the propensity through natural selection to just assume that all patterns are real and all patternicities represent real and important phenomenon. And we are the descendants of the most successful patternicity primates. So if you're following me, what I'm saying is that people believe weird things because we believe things. And it's just easier to believe that everything's real rather than try to figure out which are real and which are not, and our brains evolved this capacity for just believing everything. And therein lies the problem. Well, for you, for me, it gives me job security. I'll always have plenty of goofy things to debunk because people believe weird things, because we have to believe all sorts of things. Now, there's lots of fun examples of random patterns in nature that look like things. For example, what does this look like? A horse. That's right. A horse, of course, unless the horse is a frog. And by giving you conflicting data, we can flip the process around. What do you see in this random pattern of noise here? You see a cow. See? You guys won't be fooled by the tusks problem. That's right. There's Bessie the cow. Last time I gave this talk in Wisconsin, they did really well on this one. They knew their cows. But if you didn't see the cow the first time after I give you the prime, of course it's still there. So by giving you the outline of the cow and then going back, okay, so Then I'm priming, what's called cognitive priming. I'm priming your brain. Arg. So we're stuck again.
He's probably stepping on your toes.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, so, oh yeah, I'm frozen again. Okay, here's what we do. There we go. No problem. Watch. Everybody think positive thoughts. Think positive thoughts. There we go, pray. Yeah, there we go. Yay, okay, so I'm not going to go backwards anymore. This is too... What do you see here? Of course you see the Dalmatian dog. There he is. How about here? See the planet Saturn? Nice. How about here? You see what? Nothing. Very good, because there's nothing there. Yes, you passed the test. In fact, if you thought you saw a pattern here, you have to see me afterwards. This is sign of pathology. This is psychopathology. You've got some brain issues. In fact, it turns out that a Swiss psychologist named Peter Breuger found that significantly more patterns were perceived in the right hemisphere via the left visual field than in the left hemisphere via the right visual field, so that it appears to be a split brain difference between where we see these patterns, the left or the right, and when we see patterns that are not really there, it's more likely to happen in the right hemisphere. In fact, it was Sagan who predicted this way back in 76 with his Dragons of Eden. There's no doubt that right hemisphere intuitive thinking may perceive patterns and connections too difficult for the left hemisphere, but it may also detect patterns where none exist. Skeptical and critical thinking is not a hallmark of the right hemisphere. So what I'm after here is trying to figure out where in the brain this happens. Now this is a little oversimplified, the old left brain, right brain stuff from the 1970s. But as a first order of approximation, it's largely true. So for example, there it is, the spinning beach ball of death. Yay! All right. On the phone with the Apple people today for like 2 hours. And here I've been dissing PCs all my life, and now this is my punishment. So this will go away in a moment. Anyway, what I'm after there is that it turns out that Peter Breuger I mentioned, and looking at left brain, right brain differences, he and his colleague Christine Moore gave subjects L-DOPA. L-DOPA is a drug for Parkinson's patients. It pumps dopamine. It stimulates the dopamine receptors in your brain to pump out more dopamine into your brain. What it did was it caused believers and skeptics to identify scrambled faces and real and jumbled words as normal. That is, increasing the amount of dopamine in your brain increased the tendency to find patterns, whether they were real or not. And the effect was stronger for skeptics than for believers, which is weird until you think about it. Okay, so they scored the believers and skeptics based on a paper-pencil test, like do you believe in ESP, do you believe in precognition, do you believe in telekinesis, ghosts, whatever. And people score on a scale of 1 to 10 and so forth, and you get a measure. How skeptical you are, how strong you believe in the paranormal. So people that were pretty skeptical of the paranormal were much more affected by the L-DOPA than those who were believers in the paranormal. So my explanation for this is that, if you're way up here and you already pretty much believe everything, getting a little boost of dopamine doesn't push you much. There's not much room to go. You already believe everything. Whereas if you're a skeptic, there's more room for improvement, as it were. So this actually got me thinking about the difference between creativity and madness. You've heard this issue before. And my two favorite examples of this, which have to do with how much dopamine you have in your brain, which part of your brain you're using, as it relates to the signal-to-noise ratio problem. That is, you want to have you want to be open-minded enough to find new patterns that no one else has seen before, because that's good. That's the basis of creativity and art and music and science and literature and so forth. That's how we make new discoveries and create new things. But you don't want to be so open-minded that your brains fall out and you believe every wacky thing. So my two favorite examples here on the left, Richard Feynman won the Nobel Prize in physics for his research on quantum electrodynamics and his ability to see patterns that no one else could see. For example, we can barely make this out, but this is his van, and these are Feynman diagrams on the back of his van. The van is in Pasadena. It's still around. The diagrams are a little faded, but famous stories about Feynman. They have to do with how subatomic particles collide and then interact. And it's very difficult to calculate these mathematically, but you can visualize them. So he saw a pattern no one else could see, and people still use Feynman diagrams today. And the story is that he was driving around Pasadena in his van, and somebody rolled down their window and said, "Hey, how come you have Feynman diagrams on your van?" And he said, "'Cause I'm Feynman," which I thought would be pretty cool. And this guy, John Nash, also won the Nobel Prize in mathematics for his discovery of principles of game theory and how people interact in complex strategic situations. And he won the Nobel Prize for that. But he also saw patterns that no one else saw: secret government conspiracies and hidden government agents and secret codes and secret government projects and so on. And if you think too much of that, you get labeled schizophrenia, which he was, as featured in the film A Beautiful Mind. So there is a fine line there. Well, maybe it's not so fine, but there's a line there for sure about keeping an open mind. It also appears to be related to superstition and control. Bronowski's research with the Trobriand Islanders, where he discovered that the further out the fishermen go, the less certain their catch is going to be, and the more superstitions they had and rituals they had surrounding their fishing activities versus in the shallow waters or on the land, rivers, in which they were largely in control. So my favorite example is, baseball players. The process of fielding a ball is fairly easy to do relative to batting. And so the average fielder succeeds 90 to 95% of the time. And there are very few superstitions related to fielding a baseball. Hitters, on the other hand, the best ones fail 7 out of 10 times. Almost every time they get up, they're going to fail. And that's the best of them. And so they've developed, a lot of players have a lot of rituals surrounding hitting, not fielding. That's Wade Boggs, one of the more superstitious of the kind. He had a whole process of eating. He had to prepare chicken dishes before he came to the game. And he became so proficient at this, he even wrote a book called Foul Tips. Which I thought was kind of funny. Susan Blackmore, who you know is the paranormal researcher turned skeptic, did some research on patternicity related to paranormal belief. She found that believers in ESP tend to see objects, whether they're there or not, in these 70% degraded images. Like, for example, this one. What do you see there? You see a Jesus fish? That's not bad. No one's ever said that before. So basically, in the old technology in the 70s, you just keep photocopying an image with the copied image. All right, now let's look in the brain a little bit further. I want to tell you about Sam Harris's study at UCLA with a functional MRI brain scanning machine to see if we can figure out where in the brain beliefs happen and how they happen. So a little bit about this. First of all, since we're skeptics, there's room for skepticism on these brain scan research. So it's a huge magnet that they shove your upper body into, and inside your blood are blood cells that have hemoglobin, that have iron atoms in them, and inside the iron atoms are these little nucleus of the atom, in which there are protons inside the nucleus, and the protons spin. And they spin like top spin. They sort of wobble a little bit. And if you hammer them with a big magnet, they flop over. And you can measure the movement, the flopping of the proton inside the nucleus of the atom. And the head unit they stick on your head and they shove you in there measures the blood moving around in your brain, based on the little atoms inside your blood cells. It's an amazing piece of technology. These machines cost upwards of $10 million, and they cost thousands of dollars to run. So when you do an experiment, you have to have a grant because somebody's got to pay to run the machine. It's really claustrophobic. In fact, I lasted, that's me, about 5 minutes before. Well, what they do is they shove you in there, and you got this helmet on and these wedges and these goggles, and on the goggles are little computer screens that match the computer screens out in the control room, and that's where they present the stimuli to you, and you have a little keypad, you push buttons like A and B or whatever, the left arrow, the right arrow, they give you choices. Now the reason they do that, you have to have choices. You have to do this and then you have to do that, because the only way to measure what's going on in your brain is that the blood moves around. Otherwise you can't see anything. And it just looks like a gray blob. So they have to take statistically the data and then colorize it. It's almost like the JPL images of Venus and Mars before they put the artificial color. You can't really see anything. So they do that. And of course people have different sized heads and different sized brains, and they move around a little bit. So they have to control for all that and average out all the brains of everybody that did the experiment. So when you see, a brain like that in Newsweek or whatever, Scientific American, they'll, look, there's your brain on money or God or whatever. That isn't at all what you see when you're there. It's all added later. And that isn't actually anybody's brain. That's just a statistical compilation of all the 16 brains of the subjects that did the experiment. And, I was mentioning that they give you, in addition to the keypad, they give you this little thing to squeeze, which I told him, I don't need that. What's that for? And he said, that's in case you panic. And I said, I don't need that. Anyway, 5 minutes later, I'm squeezing this thing like, get me the hell out of here. It's very claustrophobic. Anyway, so that's how it works. So in this particular experiment, Sam ran 14 adult subjects scanned while evaluating statements as either true, false, or undecidable. And then you press a button, left, middle, right, squeezed in there like that. And so he presented them with a different category of questions, like 2 plus 6 plus 8 equals 16. Yes, obviously. 62 could be evenly divided by 9. Obviously not, false. Or 1.2 to the power of 57 equals 32608.5153. I don't know, I don't know, right? Actually, the other day, just for fun, I ran that on my calculator, and it's 1.2 to the power of 56. Unless I did it wrong, I thought, it's a little weird, Sam. Anyway, and then he asked factual type questions. These are just examples of many questions. These experiments go on for a long time, like an hour, hour and a half. You're in that machine if you last. So most people have 10 fingers and toes. Yes, obviously true. Eagles are common pets. Obviously false. The Dow Jones Industrial Average rose 1.2% last Tuesday. I can't remember. I don't know. Or ethical questions. It's bad to take pleasure in another's suffering. Yes. Children should have no rights until they can vote. No. Well, maybe some people think that. And it is better to lie to a child than to an adult. Well, I don't. Depends. I don't know. So okay. Again, what they're after is you're having to make decisions, and you see where the blood flows. And the theory behind that is that if your neurons are firing a lot over here, that takes a lot of energy. So they need more oxygen to fire a lot, and so they send signals to your body to send more blood to that area. And that takes 4 or 5 seconds to get there. And then, so that's why you have to let these experiments sort of run so you can see the blood goes over here, and then it goes over there, and then it goes up here, and so on. That's why they do that. 4 findings. 1, contrasting belief and disbelief. So you have to contrast them, or you're not going to get the little spots. Contrasting belief and disbelief in the brain scans yielded a spike in neural activity in the ventral medial prefrontal cortex, right there, about an inch back. Associated with decision making and learning in the context of a reward. So you're having to think, obviously. 2, contrasting uncertainty with both belief and disbelief revealed elevated neural action in the anterior cingulate cortex. So that's the ACC, that's your error detection network. You might think of that as the patternicity detection. Is that a real pattern or not? I can't quite make that out. And that's, again, it's like a little up further and back, up a little bit and back. You can see where it is right there. That's your forehead there. Right? Now, another thing to remember about these experiments, it's not like that part of your brain was just sitting there doing nothing. Like, I wonder what he's going to do, because I'm getting bored. No, you only use 10% of your brain and all that nonsense, right? No, your brain is always working away. It's just whirring away. Running your body is mostly what it does. So you have to give it extra things to do to see a boost of activity. It's not like it was doing nothing, now it's doing something. It's just doing more of what it was doing. So we assume that in moral decisions or factual decisions like those, this becomes more active. Contrasting disbelief and belief showed increased brain response in the left inferior frontal gyrus, the anterior insula, and the dorsal anterior cingulate, all associated with responses to negative stimuli, pain, perception, and disgust. Okay, so these are, let's see, so here's your forehead, right? So back even further. In other words, having to take the step to become skeptical, like, I'm going to think about this for a minute, I have to ponder on this and so on, it's associated with these things that are not pleasant, kind of negative. Now we have neural pathways that develop for disgust. There's good reasons for that, because there's lots of things we should be disgusted about that are not good for us physically. Disease, for example, and pain. And it appears that being skeptical is associated with like bad smells and bad tastes. You see where I'm going with this? Easy to be a believer. You get positive reinforcement. And then finally, the fourth one, significant reaction time differences. Belief statements are evaluated quickly, disbelief and uncertain statements slower. So it takes longer, smells bad, tastes bad, it's uncomfortable, it's unpleasant. And this is inside the brain. And here I'm not talking about social pressure, like, oh, I don't want to go against my group. No, it's worse than that. Just by yourself, it's unpleasant and uncomfortable and smells bad, tastes bad, takes longer to be a skeptic. In other words, we accept appearances as reality until they prove otherwise. So, in other words, this is back to the default position is just believe. The moment you grasp it and comprehend it, your brain automatically kicks in that it must be true, I believe it. Then it takes an extra step to go, wait a minute, maybe I don't believe it, which takes more time and energy, it's uncomfortable and so on. It's a little bit like the difference between the problem with lying. Lying takes an extra cognitive step. You have to keep track of the truth and the lie. So that takes longer, takes more energy. That's what's behind these brain scan technologies for lie detection. The lie detector itself is a bunch of bunk. I can teach you how to beat the lie detector if you like in the Q&A. If you want to ask me how to beat the lie detector, I'll tell you in 1 minute how to do it. It's really easy. The idea is behind the brain scan is that you can't beat that because your brain is just taking longer to process the truth from the not truth because it takes more time. Okay, so now often it turns out what we're thinking about influences what we think we see in a pattern, a random pattern of noise. So what you have in your mind sort of shapes what you see on the screen. So for example, we're all environmentally conscious now because of Al Gore, and you know, we all want to save the whales and save the marine mammals. So you all see dolphins here, right? See, there's a dolphin right there. There he is. There's a dolphin. There's his little flipper, and that's his tail. And there's a dolphin. That's a dolphin tail there, guys. So illusions help us understand how the brain works because it gets fooled, and how the brain gets fooled or how it gets damaged or how it doesn't work tells us what it was doing. So like the impossible crate illusion is a classic one where the boards seem to bend around each other, in the front to the back and the back flips to the front and so on. Now, of course you say, well, come on, Shermer, that's flatland, that's 2D. Anybody can fool the brain in 2D. Well, here is the impossible crate illusion in 3D by my friend, the late Jerry Andrus, the great magician who specialized in creating three-dimensional illusions from classic 2D illusions. Can you see how it's done? Camera angle, that's right. Camera angle is everything. So the photographer is way over here by the, whoa, I just noticed that organ. Wow. Holy crap, that thing is big. That is intimidating. You know, these guys, they know how to do it, right? Let's face it. The secular society, so We need that. So, well, okay, so the photographer's way over here, and this board appears to overlap with this one, this overlaps with this one, this rope has a cable in it. But even knowing how it's done, I hate to go backwards, there we go. You can see that it's, the illusion works. Why does the illusion work? Okay, because your brain has models already wired into it, either through evolution or through experience, of what angles look like. And so I didn't go into the whole how the brain works and how we learn all this stuff, but basically you have a neuron, we have so many neurons, 100 billion neurons, it's like galaxies, like 100 billion stars in a galaxy, 100 billion neurons, and every one of those has like 1,000 connections. So there's approximately 10 to the 15 interneural connections. Essentially, you can do better than Watson, it's just that he's faster on the little clicker, I think. And so you can store basically enough information for everything you've ever seen, every angle, every curve, every person, and so forth. Here's another interesting illusion that was discovered last year, the Leaning Tower of Pisa. It's not leaning. No, just kidding. So, hang on. We're going to do this again. You do? Yeah, maybe I should do that. I have it on my I have an extra hard drive. Okay. Yes, give it to me. I have my external hard drive here. I am really okay. See, and it died. Yeah, okay. So, oh boy. Let's just get rid of that. Okay. Let's get rid of that. Put you up there. Gosh. So I just need to...
Other way. There you go.
Okay, so, oops.
Yeah, my mouse is pretty sensitive.
Okay, what,
Archive right there.
oh, archive, that's it,
Yeah.
yeah.
Oop. Oh, you just...
What'd I do?
There.
Oh, yeah, okay.
I think you just accidentally ejected it.
No. I did?
Yeah, let's try this again.
Okay,
Hey, you tell me what to do.
okay.
My mouse is kind of personalized.
Yeah. I've never had to do this, by the way. This is very frustrating. I'm really sorry. Okay, so go down to, wait, let's see. Let's go up. It's...
Do you know what it's called?
Wait a minute, this looks really funky. I don't remember seeing this. Oop. All right. I'm not seeing this. Is this really my... Oh, yeah, it is archive, right.
Yeah.
I just saved it today. Oh, you can see it hypersensitive.
Do you remember what it's called?
Yeah, it's Believing Brain. Yeah. Believing Brain.
Brain.
There it is.
That's it?
That's it, right there.
Okie dokie.
See, it didn't say... Oh, right.
I think it might be the file. I don't know if it's your laptop.
Maybe we should find it and drag it onto your...
I mean, that is it, right? There isn't another...
wait. No, there. Try that. Why is there three of them?
These are documents. Those are
No,
words.
no.
Oh.
Yeah.
Aha. I don't know. I'm getting it. It might be the It might be the PowerPoint presentation.
Could be corrupted. Could be all my files are corrupted now.
Oh.
Here it is.
Okay.
Well,
Good luck.
well, that's an old
Got
one.
it?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Let's see. Okay, I think we're actually there. Close enough. Yeah, that'll work. Oh, sorry. Okay. There it is. Right? Yay! Thank you. That is a pain. Okay, so one of these looks like it's leaning more than the other. Right? Again, it's the same picture side by side. Every year there's an illusion contest. This one won last year from McGill University scientists. Why does it do that? That's the question. Now I'm after something else here, how easy it is to fool our brains with things like this. I think it has to do with the fact, again, you follow me, right? The same picture, just side by side. So you're comparing this angle to that angle instead of this angle to this angle. I think that's what's going on. Now, the scientists say that the actual reason is that normally when we look up at buildings, they're converging. Just like when you stand in railroad tracks, they converge together in the distance. But I'm not sure that's the case. I had a different example of that. Oh, well. So this is an older illusion. Okay. Some other illusions, like the table illusion, where can't even see that. Okay, that's better. So it's the exact same rectangles, but if you put the legs somewhere else, then it changes the shape in your mind. But if you remove them, you can see even that it's not quite. Doesn't look quite the same, although they are exactly the same. So here we see faces. So certain patterns are more normal to see, or more natural to see. In this case, oh, you can't see that. Arg. All right. So one of these faces looks slightly weirder than the other one. Which one? Okay, so I'm going to flip it upside down, right side up, so it'll be that way. That's right. So what's going on there is that facial recognition happens in the fusiform gyrus in the temporal lobes just above your ears. And so there's two processes. The first process is just an initial brain face scan. Is it a face? Is it not a face? Is it somebody I know? Is it somebody I don't know? And so forth. And then the second process, these more detailed ones, kick in for details like eyes, ears, nose, mouth, so forth. And so that's why initially when you look at that, well, they look kind of the same until you start examining the details and you say, wait a minute, there's something kind of wrong there. And then once it right side up, of course, it kicks in. So we tend to see faces because faces are important to us for reading people's emotions and for judging trustworthiness, things like that. We imprint on faces when we're very young. So it doesn't take many data points, 3 data points, 2 eyes and a mouth. That's all you need. So something like this, shot by the Viking spacecraft in 1976, which then the ufologists and Martian folks got all excited about, like, this is it. The Martians are making monumental architecture to signal us or whatever. So the good folks at NASA took a high-resolution picture with a better camera, more close-up in 2000, and that's the face on Mars. Now, if you kind of squint, actually, it's so bright up on the wall there. I wonder if we can hit the lights. I wonder if could hit the big lights there. But really, all you need is the 2 eyes and the mouth, and this is shadowy enough that it causes your fusiform gyrus to kick in and see that. But here's the face on a happy face on Mars. There's a bunch of faces in this rock. The nun bun is another one of my favorites. Here's Our Lady of the Chicago Underpass. I like this, Satan loves you. Yeah. Some people see Pope John Paul II in this image. Here's the Virgin Mary on a grilled cheese sandwich. It really does look like a pretty striking face. Looks like Mae West, right, exactly. I said Jane Russell. Same idea. Here's the Virgin Mary on a side of a bank building in Clearwater, Florida. So Dawkins and Randy and I were there on a Good Friday, which was great. And people were there lighting candles, and there was somebody put up a big crucifix there. People were there in their wheelchairs and crutches and so on. And it turns out that Clearwater, Florida isn't very clear. The water is very mineralized. Wherever there's a sprinkler head, you get this sort of staining on the windows. In fact, there was another image on the back there where there used to be a palm tree here and a sprinkler head, but they started to wipe it off because I guess you could only have one miracle per building. So is it really a miracle of Mary, or is it a miracle of Marge? Well, I'm not Catholic, but I am a Simpsons fan, so it kicked right in. Okay, so what's the difference between, back to our hominid on the plains of Africa 3.5 million years ago, here rustling the grass is a dangerous predator, just the wind, your name is Lucy. What's the difference between the wind and a dangerous predator? Well, the wind is inanimate, and a dangerous predator is an intentional agent. So this is my second concept. You'll have to remember two things for the test tonight. Patternicity and agenicity, the tendency to infuse patterns with meaning, intention, and agency, often invisible beings from the top down. So souls, spirits, ghosts, gods, demons, angels, aliens, intelligent designers, government conspiracists, and all manner of invisible agents with power and intention are believed to haunt our world and control our lives. I think agenicity is the basis of animism and polytheism and monotheism, and even the belief in aliens, which are always portrayed as these super advanced, technologically, scientifically powerful, morally superior beings coming down from on high to save us from nuclear war or global warming or whatever the latest thing is in culture at the time that the movies come out, like the 1951 Day the Earth Stood Still, or the remake with Keanu Reeves, which was global warming instead of nuclear war, whatever. But again, the aliens are always portrayed as these sort of higher order beings, as is the intelligent designer, who's essentially just a sophisticated genetic engineer, just a little bit ahead of J. Craig Ventnor, I guess, in his lab, something like that. Or the idea that intelligent government designers can save us from on high. It's the basis of conspiracy theorists like the Illuminati or the Bilderbergers or the Rockefellers or the Rothschilds or the Skull and Bones or whatever. The elites are up there. Jfk Conspiracists. This was one of my more favorite days spent in Dealey Plaza. If you've never been to Dallas, if you go to Dallas, go to Dealey Plaza. It's really a trip. There's always people there giving tours to show you where the hidden conspiracists were, the shooters were. For a couple of bucks, they'll give you the whole tour, the photographs, and the whole thing. My favorite was the manhole cover. The shooter was down there, popped up at the last second, bam, and then popped back down like a video game. Of course, conspiracies are true. Some conspiracies happen. It's not like they're impossible. Lincoln was assassinated by a conspiracy. Some conspiracies are true. So the question is, how can you tell the difference, right? So we're back to the pattern detection problem, right? Which are the true patterns, which are the false patterns? Is that a Murdoch? Yeah, well, I don't know. So I want to talk about agenicity and dualism again. I want to look into the brain for where this happens. So sort of fun examples, like we get movies like this because we're able to project ourselves and imagine what it would be like to have a different body or be a different age, right? So whether it's Tom Hanks' Big, where he suddenly becomes older, or if it's 13 going on 30 and Jennifer Gardner becomes, no, it's the reverse. Tom Hanks becomes younger, wasn't it? Yeah, and 13 she gets older. Or in the case of Freaky Friday, where Lindsay Lohan and Jamie Lee Curtis switch bodies. That's a weird thing to think about. This is the one transplant, a brain transplant, where you should be the donor, not the recipient, right? Because where are you located? In your brain. But we are natural-born dualists. For some reason, the evidence is pretty overwhelming about this. From the smallest children, I mean, the earliest you can test them, from like less than 1 year old, it's easy to detect that they think there's two different things going on. There's a physical body, and then there's something else. There's a spirit, a soul, a mind, or something like that. So where does this happen? It has to do with something called theory of mind, that I'm able to project myself into your mind, or your brain, or your body, and imagine what it would be like to be you. And you can do that with me. So not only am I self-aware, I'm aware that I'm a person, I'm also aware that you're a person. And I'm aware that you're aware that I'm aware that I'm a person and that you're a person too. And so we mind read. This is called mind reading, not the psychic mind reading, but the actual real mind reading. I try to anticipate, like, what jokes would you like to hear? Will they get this joke or will they get that joke? How should I say it? Well, I imagine me sitting there listening to this, then I imagine me imagining being you, imagining being me. And where does this happen? Well, you just run those brain scan experiments and you can see where it happens in the anterior paracingulate cortex and the superior temporal sulci, for example. Perception of intentional behavior on the part of other organisms, such as that predator intends to eat me. You can actually tell the difference, whether it's a monkey and a little neural electrodes inside there or a brain scan with a human. Just a hand comes in and does something and then pulls back out. Whether it's intentionally doing something or it's not actually knocking something over accidentally, different parts of the brain are actually measuring intentional behavior on the part of somebody else versus unintentional behavior. Because we're such social beings, we can actually detect intention. Well, you already know you could do this, but here is where it happens in the brain. And the temporal lobes seem to be deeply involved with these kinds of abnormal, anomalous psychological experiences that gives rise to belief in things like angels and aliens and gods and ghosts and demons and so forth. Temporal lobes just above your ears. If you stimulate them, so the way they get this data is pretty interesting. So there are epileptic patients who have to have open brain surgery where they cut the corpus callosum, or they'll take out part of the brain to stop the seizures from spreading. So you ask them, do you mind if we wake you up in the middle of this and poke around and ask you some questions? And amazingly, they say, yeah, sure, why not? And they sign a waiver, and you wake them up, and you poke around, and you say, what's going on now? And so you just put a little electrical electrodes in there and you touch different parts of the brain. And you can stimulate the feeling of the presence of others, hearing music, angelic voices, intense meaningfulness connected to forces greater than yourself, like God. If you go deeper inside through the temporal lobes into the amygdala and the hippocampus of the limbic system, you can produce emotional connectedness to these kinds of experiences. Tense meaningfulness, depersonalization, connection with God or the cosmos. So in other words, all belief is mediated by the brain. The mind is just a word for what the brain does. Okay, so I'm a materialist. I'm a monist. I think there's only one substance, brain. Dualists, we're all natural-born dualists, but that's an error. That's wrong. Well, I think so. Anyway, not everybody agrees with me. But we know this. I'm pretty sure the evidence is pretty clear on this, even though Deepak disagrees with me on this, but that's another story. If you cut out part of the brain, you ding it with a stroke or a car accident or something like that, whatever it was doing is gone. So if you take out the wires, the function is gone. Now Deepak will go, oh yes, Michael, but you can rewire the brain through thoughtful meditation. So, yeah, rewire. Without the wires, the function's gone. And you know this from dementia and Alzheimer's. The person just disappears slowly, neuron by neuron, over the course of months and years. Whatever was there is gone. It is gone forever. So that tells us that it's just the brain. There is nothing more than the electric meat. That's it. There's no soul, there's no mind floating out there. Yet, if you touch parts of it, it'll produce this idea that there's something else. That's how you can get near-death and out-of-body experiences. For example, James Winery discovered that about a quarter to a half of his pilots in the Air Force, when accelerated to the point of blacking out, part of their training, what fun, had near-death and out-of-body experiences. And you can see the videos of them. They're just sitting there, drooling. They're passed out. It's apoxia, oxygen deprivation to the cortex. The cortex just shuts down. As oxygen shuts down, the blood goes to the center of your body, like in shock, for example. And so, like the visual cortex is on the back of your brain. It's on the outside here. So as the blood goes in, it's just shutting down, apparently in some sort of pattern that causes you to look like you're a tunnel, or a white light at the end of the tunnel, or a spiraling effect, something like that. You can do it by touching that red spot right there with one of those electrodes. This was done in 2002 by a Swiss scientist named Olaf Blank, who touched an epileptic patient woman. Open brain, can we wake you up? Yes, okay, here we go. What's going on now? I'm floating above my body. Wow. And they cranked up the electricity. Wow, way up here now. And then they crank it back down. Oh, I'm coming back down now. And my left leg is up, my right leg is up, and so forth. They just by touching there. The God helmet, this is Michael Persinger's research at Laurentian University. He puts this helmet on his subjects here, and it has solenoids on it, and it bombards your temporal lobes with electromagnetic radiation. Now, let's see if I have okay, so this is a slightly different program. Let's see, I had a video of that, but I think we'll skip the video. Anyway, I went and did this, Persinger's lab. I sat in so he puts you in this like sensory deprivation room, and it's super quiet. They turn off all the lights, and then if you don't fall asleep, you start to have some pretty cool experiences. So I had like a sense of presence in the room, like I felt like I was leaving my body, this sort of thing. But I'm pretty skeptical, so my experiences were pretty mild, but other people have reported having really dramatic experiences, like being abducted by aliens and going to hell and that kind of thing. Now, Persinger, he actually thinks the paranormal is real, or something like the paranormal, and that it's a product of the brain. I'm not sure this is true, but I like the idea of experimenting to see if you can figure out what's happening neurologically in the brain. I mean, where in nature do you get electromagnetic fields like that? Well, his theory has to do with plate tectonics. So, like, plates slide and they create these electromagnetic fields, and that would explain a lot of the goofiness in Southern California. But I'm skeptical because energy dissipates with the square of the distance, and we're nowhere near these fault lines. It's not like the helmet is right there; it's millimeters from your skull, bombarding your temporal lobes. That's very different than over the hill and up Interstate 14 to the San Andreas Fault. It's a long ways away. So it seems unlikely that would be the cause. Nevertheless, we know from other research that people that have little minor seizures and strokes, they get hyper-religious, they hear voices, they talk in tongues, things like that in the temporal lobe. Okay, so I'm going to skip through these. We already did that. Okay, let me just see where I am here, because I'm going to finish with... Oh, yeah, okay, so we have our problem in pattern detection. Here's how to solve it, science. Classic experiment, young woman, old woman image. Oh, you can see that pretty good. Yeah, okay, good. So this is an ambiguous figure. So when your brain sees an ambiguous figure, it flip-flops back and forth. So this is the old woman, young woman. So the young woman, she's looking this way, and that's her cute little nose, and that's her chin. And that's her ear. The old woman, this is her eye, and she's looking down this way. There's a big, craggly nose. That's her mouth, and that's a chin. Now, you can see one or the other, but not both at the same time, and your brain can switch back and forth. But you can't multitask and see. You can't do both at the same time. You can't drive and text at the same time. Okay, so, I forgot the upshot of this. So, classic experiment, one group of subjects is showing a stronger younger woman image, showing this the neutral image, they see the younger woman. Second group of subjects sees a stronger older woman image, showing this the neutral image, they see the older woman. Priming. You're priming the brain to see the world a certain way. The data then gets filtered this way or that way. You have a model of the world, the data gets fit in with the model. Data and theory. You have to have both. The facts don't just speak for themselves, despite what Anyway, never mind. Okay, so my favorite example from the history of science, Galileo, you recall, in 1609, turned his telescope to the heavens and saw things that weren't supposed to be there, like spots on the sun and mountains on the moon casting shadows and things orbiting Jupiter that were not supposed to be there. All that was great. He was, overthrowing Aristotelian cosmology that said all objects in space must be perfectly round, perfectly smooth, and go in perfect circles, none of which was true. However, when he got to Saturn, he had a twofold problem, data and theory. Data. Saturn is twice as far away as Jupiter. Really hard to make out. Not many photons of light coming through that cloudy little lens of his. Theory. No theory of planetary rings. So he didn't really know what he was looking at, but he boldly proclaimed, I have observed that the farthest planet is threefold. Saturn was the farthest planet at the time. Threefold, 3 objects moving around. He didn't say, I conjecture. I think it possibly could be this. I'm taking a guess here. I'm not quite sure, but it could be, no, I have observed. Why did he say that? Because he was in the midst of what's called the battle of the books in the history of science. The book of nature versus the book of authority. Induction, deduction. That is, we should be able to reason our way to truth just by sitting there and thinking about it. And some truths you can do that with. Others, it doesn't hurt to go outside and actually look and see if it's really actually that way, because often it isn't that way. Galileo was on the side of the book of nature. Let's go out and actually look through the tube. He kept telling the Vatican astronomers, you should really look through the tube. I don't need to, because the authority, the philosopher, Aristotle, was right. We know he was right. Really? Did you check? We don't have to check. Anyway, so look through the tube. They refused to look through the tube, but Galileo himself got it wrong. In fact, 50 years later, there was a catalog produced by Christian Huygens on all the different theories and mistakes people had of what they thought they were seeing when they were seeing Saturn, starting with Galileo there in number 1. What Huygens did was, in one of the great illustrations in the history of science, according to Edward Tufte, who specializes in portraying data in visual form so that people understand it. So you put a couple things, better data, better theory. First, you put the sun at the center instead of the earth. You have the earth go around the sun in an ellipse, according to Kepler's first law, instead of a circle. Kepler's second law, the inner planets go around faster than the outer planets, which are super slow. So the earth is catching and passing Saturn a lot. And different times of the year, you're going to see Saturn at different angles. And therefore, it's going to look differently like that. Tufte says this is an example of Saturn as a noun, a verb, an image in 3D, 2D. It's one of the great illustrations of all time. It's a lot of data points, very simply laid out like this. And of course, that turns out to be right. Saturn is pretty close to looking like that at the moment. So you need both data and theory. And this is what science does best. Okay, so, I need see if this is going to work. So this is my favorite example. Now we're going to wrap it up here and then take some questions. So, okay, so this is going to work. All right, so I'm now going to bring it all together. Priming, cognitive biases, expectations, the theory drives the data. And my favorite example of backward masking of rock songs. Right? Okay, so some of you have already seen this because you probably saw my TED Talk. Anyway, it's all right. This is very famous. There's a whole bunch of examples of this online, but this is one of the better ones. So I'm going to play for you a portion of, there's certain things you should not be skeptical of. The greatest rock and roll song of all time. Let's just put it right out there. Forward with the words, and then I'll play it backwards without the words. You listen carefully for the hidden message, and then I'll play it backwards with the words on the screen for the prime. Here we go. Okay, let's see. We lost our volume. How did we lose our volume? Okay. Do I have it plugged in the right one? I think so. Yeah. Oh, I could try that, I guess, yeah. But we had volume before, didn't we? Yeah, we did. Yeah, okay. Let me go backwards. Okay. Now it's working. Okay, ready? There we go. Okay, now I'm not sure what it means forward, actually. But when I was in high school, this was deeply meaningful. Okay, so here it is backwards without the word. So listen carefully. Oh no! Where'd our volume go? Oh. Okay, wait a minute. All right, what'd you get? Satan? Satan sexy?
You know, it's unfortunate I haven't seen your TED Talk several times. I've been crying from all
Oh, so now you hear it. Right, yeah, okay. Right, because once you hear it, then the words just pop right out. All right, so here it is backwards. Oh. Thank you. That tool shed's a very, very dangerous place. Don't go to the tool shed. Satan is there. All right. Maybe not. Dang it. Okay. I might end there, but I had one funny video clip I was going to maybe try to show. Hang on here.
Is there going to be a test?
Yeah, there'll be a test on this afterwards. Let's see. Just for fun, let's see what happens here. See, I think I have corrupted files or something, because that's... You saw the spinning beach ball of death on her computer. Ooh, I hope I didn't. Yeah. You know what? We're just end it there. Thank you very much. This is so good. I'm really sorry. So, we'll just pop that out. There. Questions? Yes, sir.
What part of your brain made you buy a Ford?
Maybe buy a Ford. Well, oops.
You're supposed to eject it.
Oh, shoot. Oh, no.
That might be why, if you don't do that regularly, that might be why the process.
So I have,
files were corrupt.
yeah, it could be. Yeah, sorry. I hope I didn't corrupt.
No, it doesn't do anything to the computer. It's the hard drive.
Oh, it's the hard drive. Oh, okay. All right.
In the future.
Yes, sir.
Knowing this, that we're hardwired to believe everything we today, and it's intrinsically difficult for us to be skeptical. Knowing this, what do you do in this situation?
Well, yeah, the question is, if we're hardwired to believe everything, what can we do about it? Well, education obviously makes some difference, although unfortunately it's not the prophylactic that we like it to be against believing weird things. But there is an effect, demographically, people that go to college are less likely to believe weird things and believe in God and so forth, and those that don't go to college and those that go to graduate school are less likely to believe even more. Although the bump down is not as big as you might think. I mean, it's still like half of Americans believe, all sorts of paranormal things, in spite of having gone to college and all that. So education makes some effect, but not as much as you might think. So I think part of the solution is not teaching. See, education is mostly knowledge-driven instead of process. So there's a big debate in science education circles: process versus I forget what the other knowledge, I guess. So in other words, you memorize a bunch of facts about nature, but that's not enough. You have to know how science works, what the process is of discovering these things, and so that instead of teaching you what to think, we teach you how to think, and then when you encounter new things that you don't know about, you can think about it yourself. So that I think is a big step. Also the skeptical movement, just the fact that there are people that specialize in explaining weird things helps, because scientists are not, they don't think about those things. They don't really know the answers to a lot of the explanations for whatever the weird mystery happens to be. And we're changing that. We're making it, hey, this is a big problem. We should spend more time on this, thinking about this. And so I think that's part of it as well.
How do you beat the lie detector?
How do you beat the lie detector test? Well, see, it's premised on the idea that there are control questions and then the trigger questions, the ones related to the crime. So they're looking for a difference in physiological measures, your heart rate, blood pressure, perspiration, and so forth. They put the belt around your waist. They have the little thing measuring your heart rate and so forth, the blood pressure. So if you can spike the control questions and keep them up, then when you get to one of the related questions to the crime, it'll be indistinguishable from the control questions. So what you do is every time you answer the question for one of the, like, is your name such and such, is it Tuesday, that kind of thing, you squeeze your anal sphincter muscle and it causes your blood pressure to go up. I'm not kidding. I swear this is true. I couldn't believe it when this guy we had on my show, I was doing this show, and this ex-cop from Oklahoma City who now specializes in helping defense attorneys get their clients to beat the lie detector test. And he said, that's all you got to do. And I did it, and it worked. But it was just, wow, it really works. And yeah, that's it. Don't make the face. Just you can just sit there. That's it. That's how it's done. I mean, the whole thing is pretty bogus anyway, because they make it sound like it's a science, but really it's just a guy looking at graphs doing all sorts of things, and there's a subjective decision. Is it a hit or not? Is it that much more than the control or not? And there is no hard and fast algorithm that says at that point, 0.05 level statistical significance, we say it's real. No, there's nothing like that for the polygraph. So it's a pretty bogus machine. Right. You mean, is it kind of a form of madness where there's...
Have they done experiments with kind of brain animals?
Oh, you know what? I don't think so. Well, wait. Somebody did some brain scans with schizophrenias. Not related to that. It was related to them finding patterns, and they were more likely to find patterns. Not seen one related to religion. But so we should make a distinction between regular religious people. 90% of Americans believe in God, and 70% go to church every week or whatever. These people are not hearing voices of God. They're not having temporal lobe seizures. They're not schizophrenic and so on. They believe for a whole host of social, cultural, psychological reasons, upbringing, where they happen to be born, and so forth. There's a much smaller subset of people that do become hyper-religious. They speak in tongues. They writhe around on the floor and have these phenomenal physical experiences. And that's probably a physiological brain kind of thing, temporal lobes. V.S. Ramachandran at UC San Diego, he does research on these micro seizures in the temporal lobes that causes people to become hyper-religious, talking to, hearing angels' voices, that kind of thing. But that doesn't explain the average person why they believe. They believe for a bunch of other reasons that have nothing to do with that. Yeah.
If we're hardwired to believe, why is the most depressing statistic I've heard recently is that 72% of the American people don't believe in evolution?
Yeah, no, it's not, well, 72, okay, how many, it's about 40, 40, and 10. 40, 40, 10 to 15 or so. 40% of the, young earth creationists, 40% accept evolution, but God directed it. So it depends who you want, if you want to count them as in our side. I'm willing to take them, because we need all the people we can get. If you think God directed evolution, fine, whatever, I don't care, as long as our kids are getting taught evolution. And then it's only like 10 or 15% or, just God had nothing to do with it. Often these surveys have to do with how the question is worded and what choices they're given. if you only have 3 choices, you got to pick one. You're going to get some biased data there. It isn't encouraging, though. It's on the other hand, it can't just be a biological thing because Europeans don't have this issue at all. So it's obviously related to the perceived threat that science in general and evolution in particular has for religion. So it's not that Christian conservatives are anti-science. It's that they're pro something else, and they're willing to limit their acceptance of certain sciences that interfere with this other thing that's really important to them, which has to do with other moral values that they hold high in high esteem. Group cohesiveness, family, nation, this kind of stuff. And that somehow if evolution leads to communism and materialism and immorality and all this other stuff that has nothing to do with the science of evolution, it's the perceived implications of it that makes Christian conservatives nervous about it. The sliding scale. If you believe this, you'll go right down the line and end up over here. You can see it at the Creationist Museum in Kentucky. They have these big wall murals. You start with Darwin and you end up, in abortion clinics, and that's where they're going, and that's what they think. So, of course, they find that threatening. Yeah.
I'm a little nervous to ask this question because your views on economics may be a bit contrary to what you suggest, but I guess there's definitely shown a correlation between income inequality and religiosity. And so, do you think it's
Wait, I'm not aware of that data. Income inequalities and religiosity?
right, like countries like Denmark and Norway, Sweden, and France?
Oh, okay, I see. I know the question.
So do you think that unrestricted free markets have a hand in contributing to this problem as it relates to acceptance of evolution and as it relates to these sort of cognitive errors? Because I think you see what I mean.
Yeah, I do. Okay, so the larger question he's getting at is why are Americans so much more religious than Europeans? Okay, so there's 2 theories about this. And one is that sort of a free market interpretation, that where there's separation of church and state, religions have to compete with each other for their customers. You guys in the pew, and so they become more proficient at this. They're better. They're more aggressive. Like they're assertive mass marketers. Whereas European churches get tax subsidies and subsidized by the state, and they don't really have to hustle for it, and so they don't. That's one theory. The other theory is that in European countries, governments are doing what religions do here. That is, somebody needs to take care of the people that fall through the cracks. We need a social safety net. We have a moral obligation to help our fellow brothers and sisters. So who's going to do that? The government or private sources? So in America, well, we have a lot of government help, but not nearly as much as they have in Europe, and so religion does that here. And it does it pretty well. These are privatized, manning the soup kitchens, rushing off to New Orleans for Katrina, and so on, and they do this pretty well. And so to that extent, religions serve a useful purpose, and so that's sort of I think the opposite of what you're saying.
Well, I was saying, yeah, it seems, I don't know, I know you read the moral landscape, and I think Sam Harris and others have commented that the sort of free market public religion idea is sort of, I don't obviously have the exact data, but I was talking about how it seems that poverty and income inequality are correlated with religion, and that apparently the more poor you are, the more you need religion.
Oh, yes, okay, I see. Yeah, right.
So that therefore the unrestricted free markets may indirectly cause more religiosity, which causes more of these cognitive errors and
Yeah. Although, see, South American countries are amongst the most religious in the world.
I'm not necessarily trying to make an argument. I'm just asking.
Yeah, I'm thinking it through as we're doing this, right? Thinking out loud. South American countries, 99.9% Catholic, 99% of them believe in God and Jesus, the whole thing, and they're dirt poor. So why is that? So one explanation is, well, when you're poor, religion is a succor for the poor. It helps ease the pain, or offer, like Mother Teresa. Like Hitchens is so critical of Mother Teresa. She's only offering them, aid in the next life. Hang in there, and so that would be one explanation, I guess. I mean, this is one of the challenges I made to Dinesh D'Souza, Christian conservative. If religion is so great, is so wonderful, such a great force for society, why are South American countries so poor, so crime-ridden, so full of immorality as we would define it? And they're 99%, they're Catholic. Oh, well,